Good morning, fourth graders. Today is Monday, April 20th, 2020. Just remember that I sent out things for reading and writing, and Mr. Strangling did math and social studies. Mr. Barrel's whipping out stuff for science. Make sure you go back in and check your dojo portfolios to find out what's there. Art, music, Phi-Ed, it's all there for you guys. Also, don't forget to be reading. If anybody is running out of books to read, please let me know. I can drop them off in your mailbox. I can put them on your front step. We can get you books so that you guys can continue reading for AR and just reading for enjoyment too. So, okay, Monday. We left off on Friday. Ask yourself what was happening in our story. Go back and try to remember, comprehend what we had read. Dune and Lena had found that paper that Poppy had kind of gummed up and ripped a little bit, and somehow she figured out that they need to go into the pipeworks, and so she asked Dune for help. And they had gone down, they found a secret door that had been locked, but they could get into it that led to a door that they couldn't get into. But at that moment, as they were deciding to leave, they heard footsteps. Somebody was approaching where they were. Okay, then the footsteps slowed, and they were getting closer and closer. Dune and Lena flattened themselves against the wall and stood motionless. The footsteps stopped briefly, and there was another grunt. Then the steps continued, but seemed to be fading. In a moment from a distance, there was another sound like the chink of a key turning in a lock, the click of a latch opening. Lena made an astonished face at Dune. Someone had gone down and roped that roped tunnel and opened that door. She put her mouth close to Dune's ear. "Should we try to see who it is?" she whispered. Dune shook his head. "I don't think we should," he said. "We need to go. We could just peek around the corner." It was too tempting not to try. They crept forward to the place where the tunnel turned. From there they could see the entrance to the roped tunnel, and holding their breath, they watched. And in 1 minute, they heard a thump and a click, the door closing, the lock turning, and footsteps once more. This time, quick steps. A long leg stepped over the rope, and the person it belonged to turned and walked away. All they saw was a dark coat, dark, untidy hair, and he walked with a lurching motion that struck Lena as somehow familiar. In a few seconds, he had vanished into the shadows. When they came up out of the pipeworks, they stripped off their boots and slickers and hurried out into Plumber Square, where they flopped down on a bench and burst into furious talk. "Someone got there before us," said Lena. Dune said he was walking slowly when he went in, as if he was looking for something, and he walked fast when he came out. As if he'd found it," Lena said. "What was it? I can't stand not knowing." Dune jumped up. He paced back and forth in front of the bench. "But how did he get the key?" he asked. "Did he find instructions like the ones you found? And how did he get into the pipeworks? I don't think he works there." "There's something familiar about the way he walked," said Lena, "but I don't know why." "Well, anyhow, he opened that door and we can't," said Dune. "If it does go somewhere, if it does lead out of Ember, he'll be telling the whole city pretty soon. He'll be a hero." Dune sat down again. "If he's found the way out, we'll be glad, of course," he said glumly. "It doesn't matter who finds it, as long as it helps the city." "Well, that's right," Lena said. "It's just that I thought we were going to find it," said Dune. "Yes," said Lena, thinking how grand it would have been to stand before all of Ember announcing their discovery. They sat without talking for a while, lost in their own thoughts. A man pulling a cart full of wood scraps went by. A woman leaned from a lighted window on Gapery Street and called out to some boys playing in the square below. A couple of guards in their red and brown uniforms ambled across the square laughing. The town clock rang out 6 deep booms that Lena could feel like shudders beneath her ribs. Dune said, "I guess we do now is wait to see if there's an announcement, huh?" "I guess so," said Lena. "Maybe that door is nothing special after all," said Dune. "Maybe it's an old unused supply closet." But Lena wasn't ready to quite believe that. Maybe it wasn't the door out of Ember, but it was a mystery nonetheless. A mystery connected, she was sure, to the bigger mystery they were trying to solve. Chapter 10 is called Blue Sky and Goodbye. Lena slept restlessly that night. She had frightening dreams in which something dangerous was lurking in the darkness. When the lights went out in the morning, she opened her eyes. Her first thought was of the door in the pipeworks, and then right away she felt a thud of disappointment because the door was locked and someone else, not her, knew what was behind it. She went to wake Granny. "Time to get up," she told Granny, but Granny didn't answer. She was laying there with her mouth half open and breathing in a strange, hoarse way. I don't feel too good, she said in a weak voice. Lena felt Granny's forehead. It was hot. Her hands were cold. She ran for Mrs. Murdo and asked she ran to Clovering Square to tell Captain Fleury she would not be coming to work today. Then she ran to Oliver Street to the office of Dr. Tower, where she banged on the door until the doctor opened it. Dr. Tower was a thin woman with uncombed hair and shadows under her eyes. When she saw Lena, she seemed to grow even more tired. Dr. Tower, said Lena, my grandmother, she's sick. Will you come? I will, she said, but I can't promise to help her. I'm low on medicine. But come and look, please. Maybe she doesn't need medicine. Lena led the doctor the few blocks to her house. When she saw Granny, the doctor sighed. How are you, Granny Mayfleet? She asked. Granny looked to the doctor blearily. I don't feel so good, she said. Dr. Tower laid a hand across her forehead, and she asked her to stick out her tongue, and she listened to her heart and her breathing. She has a fever, the doctor told Lena. You'll need to stay home with her today. Make her some soup. Give her water to drink. Put rags in cool water and lay them across her forehead. She picked up Granny's bony hand in her rough, reddish one. What's best for you, my dear, is to sleep today, she said. Your good granddaughter will take good care of you. And all day that's what Lena did. She made a thin soup of spinach and onions and fed it to Granny a spoonful at a time. She stroked Granny's forehead, held her hand, and talked to her about cheerful things. She kept Poppy as quiet as she could, but as she did all this, in the back of her mind was the memory of the day of her father's illness, when he seemed to grow dim like a lamp losing power, and the sound of his breathing was like water gurgling through a clogged pipe. Though she didn't want to, she also remembered the evening that her father let out one last short breath and did not take another. The morning, a few months later, when Dr. Tower emerged from her mother's bedroom with a crying baby and a face that was heavy with bad news. In the late afternoon, Granny got restless. She lifted herself up on an elbow. Did we find it? She asked Lena. Did we ever find it? Find what, Granny? The thing that was lost, said Granny. The old thing. My grandfather lost it. Oh, yes, said Lena. Don't worry, Granny. We found it. It's safe now. Oh, good. Granny sank back onto her pillows and smiled at the ceiling. What a relief, she said. She coughed a couple times, closed her eyes, and fell asleep. Lena stayed home from work the next day as well. It was a long day. Granny dozed most of the time, and Poppy, delighted to have Lena at home to play with, kept toddling over with things she found. Dust rags, kitchen spoons, stray shoes, and whacking them against Lena's knees, saying, Play with this! Play with this! Lena was glad to play with her, but after a while she'd had enough of spoon banging and rag tugging and shoe rolling. Let's do something else, she said to Poppy. Should we draw? Granny had drunk a full cup of soup for dinner and was falling asleep again, so Lena got out her colored pencils and two of the can labels she'd been saving. They were white on the back and made good enough drawing paper if you flattened them out. With her sharpest kitchen knife, she whittled the pencils into points. She gave the green pencil and one can label to Poppy, and she herself took the blue pencil and smoothed out the other can label on the table. What should we draw? Taking hold of a pencil was like opening a tap inside her mind through which her imagination flowed. She could feel the pictures ready to come out. It was a sort of pressure like water in a pipe. She always thought she would draw something wonderful, but what she actually drew never quite matched that feeling. It was like when she tried to tell a dream. The words just never really captured how she felt. Poppy was grasping the pencil of her fist and making a wild scribble. Wookade! Wookade! She cried. Lovely, said Lena. Without even a clear idea of what it was to be, she began her own picture. She started on the left side of the can label. First, she drew a tall, narrow box, like a building. Then moved boxes next to it, a cluster of buildings. Next, she drew a few tiny people walking on the street below the buildings. It was what she almost always drew, the other city. And every time she drew it, she had the same frustrating feeling. There was more to be drawn. There was other things in this city. There were marvels there, but she couldn't imagine what they were. All she knew was that this city was bright in a different way from Ember. Where the brightness came from she didn't know. She drew more buildings and filled in the windows and doors, and she put in street lamps. She added a greenhouse. All the way across the paper, she drew buildings of different sizes. All the buildings were white because that was the color of her paper. She set her pencil down for a moment and studied what she'd done. It was time to fill in the sky and the pictures she'd done with regular pencils. The sky was its true color, black. But this time, she decided to make it blue for some reason since she was using her blue pencil. Methodically, as Poppy scratched and scribbled beside her, Lena colored in the space above the buildings, her pencil moving back and forth in short lines until the entire sky was blue. She sat back and looked at her picture. Wouldn't it be strange, she thought, to have a blue sky? But she liked the way it looked. It was beautiful. A blue sky. Poppy had started to use her pencil to poke holes in her paper, and Lena finally folded up the picture and took Poppy's away from her. All right, my dear, she said, time for dinner. And that's where we'll stop. Okay. Make sure you check in with your dojo. If anybody has any questions, let me know. And we will have a hangout at 10 o'clock today. All right, we'll see you then. Bye.